Over the years, as an antique dealer and a collector, you get to meet. I've gotten to meet an awful lot of interesting people, and one fellow in particular I got to know starting back in the sort of the early 1980s. I used to run into him in antique shops all the time in Boston and Southern New Hampshire. I'd run into him at auction previews and things, and he was a good bit older than I was. He was probably 30 years or so older than I am, but he was just always so welcoming and interesting to talk to. He knew an enormous amount about Chinese porcelain, Chinese art. And I finally introduced myself to him, and I said, "Hi." I said, I run into you all the time. My name is Peter Combs." And he goes, "Hi." He says, "My name is Crosby." And we sort of left it at that, and I continued to run into him off and on over the years. And a few years later, I was at the Peabody Essex Museum one afternoon poking around, and I ran into him in one of the galleries upstairs. And he was there, and I said, "Oh, you're here too, huh?" And he goes, "Yeah." Well, he says, "I actually work here." I said, "You do?" And he goes, "Yes." He says, My name is Crosby Forbes. And I'm the China trade curator here, Chinese export art. And I went, "Oh, well, that explains why you know so much and things." And we talked. We actually looked at a few things around the museum while we chatted. He was always wanting to educate. He was a big fan of explaining things and showing things and answering questions. And he was so enthusiastic. And following that, over the years, my business partner and I, a few years later, I went into business with a friend, and we ran auctions and we did appraisals and things, and we ended up doing appraisals for Crosby. And but before I get into everything to do with him, I want to tell you a little bit about him and his family. Crosby Forbes is the great-great-grandson of Captain Robert Bennett Forbes. And Captain Robert Bennett Forbes was, in the 19th century, one of the most successful China trade captains in America. He was phenomenally successful, starting at a very young age going to sea. He went to sea at the age of 10 or 11. He became a captain by the time he was 20. And ended up sailing ships into China for the Perkins Company in Boston, which was a big shipping concern in the city. But he had sort of his own thing, but running ships for them, going over there. And he had a brother named John Murray Forbes. And they were both very, very successful businessmen based on China trade. They brought everything into China. They also smuggled opium. They were also in the opium business, because all these China trade captains were at that point, pretty much, especially in the Boston area. But they were fantastically successful, and they ended up building this house for their mother. Their father had died at a fairly young age, and these boys went out and made a vast sum of money, and they built a house for their mother. And it was actually done in honor of their older brother, who was also in the China trade, but was killed at sea at the age of around 26 during a typhoon off the coast of China. And for their mother, they built this beautiful, beautiful house, and it is located in Milton, Massachusetts. And if it looks familiar to you, because it might, because it is known today as the Forbes House Museum, but for a while it was known as the Captain Robert Bennett Forbes Museum, or the American Museum of the China Trade. And how that came to be was that Crosby inherited this house from his aunt in 1962. And within a couple of years, he turned it into a museum house, opened it to the public, because the interior of the house, as you can see here, here's a photograph from the museum website, was just so spectacularly appointed inside. It's all China trade. 98% of the stuff in the house is from China. And it's all from the period from the late 18th century paintings right through the second or third quarter of the 19th century, and they furnished it for their mom, and they just took care of her, and the house was passed down through the family, and it ended up going to Crosby. And Crosby had been an art history major. He had gone to Harvard, and he decided to devote his life to studying Chinese export art and focusing and working heavily with his own family's collection because of it was so massive. He ended up writing a famous book on Chinese export silver. It was published back in I guess it was in the 1960s, and it was the early 70s. It was one of it was the first book that was solely devoted really to Chinese export silver, and to this day is still sort of the Bible of Chinese silver. And it was all based on his own collection and some things in the I believe in the Peabody Essex Museum. Eventually, he ended up becoming the curator at the Peabody Essex Museum, and he put the house into a trust. He still was involved with the Forbes House Museum on one side and the Peabody Essex on the other, and he merged it all beautifully. And he went on to have a very long and distinguished career there. Everybody loved Crosby, and then he was known actually among his friends as just Cros, even though his full name was Henry Ashton Crosby. And sadly, he passed away in 2012 in July. And after his death, they had some auctions, and here are some pictures. These are some pictures of the Forbes family ships that one of the ships that they used in the China trade. And here's a picture. Actually, this is sort of just a quick aside. This is a ship that was presented for Captain Robert Forbes, the Jamestown, the USS Jamestown. The U.S. Navy asked him if he would be the captain of a load of emergency relief food to the Irish during the potato famine. And he did that very happily, went over, took care of it, brought in this huge load of food and goods and provisions and supplies that they were so desperate for. And this painting was done and presented to him in as a way of saying thank you from Great Britain. But at any rate, getting back to Crosby, he had a fantastic collection, and I went to the auction, and I bought a number of things. And before I get to the thing that I bought that I kept, this is one of the cabinets I bought. It was a beautiful Chinese lacquer export cabinet. It was spectacularly well carved, beautifully lacquered. Had inscriptions above the door panels over the landscape scenes. It was wonderfully carved. It was in perfect condition. And the interior doors on the backs, when you opened it, they had paintings on them with further inscriptions and so forth. It was just a dreamy cabinet. And I had it in my office for a number of years, and then I finally decided I'd sell it I'd sold a lot of other things that I'd bought from Crosby's estate. But one of the things that I decided to keep was a pair of paintings. And these are the paintings. And they are Chinese export watercolors done on paper, probably Watman paper, English paper. And they're just absolutely beautifully done. And this is a little video I did, just sort of going over them and explaining just some of their details. And I'll come back after and we'll talk just slightly more about them. Okay, so this is the first of the two paintings that I bought from Crosby's estate. These hung in his house for quite a long time. They were always there every time I ever went there, and always liked them a great deal. And when he passed away, I really wanted to buy something that was from his collection, something that he loved, and I went to the sale, and these had not been claimed by anybody in the family. They had a lot of stuff that they got to keep, of course. And this was something that they were willing to sell, and it was in the sale, and I bought it. Beautifully framed, top quality frame job, but the painting on this is just outstanding. It's on English paper, probably by Watman, as I recall, and it was particularly good for watercolor painting. It held the colors beautifully. They didn't bleed so much. But here you can see this beautifully dressed woman with her peacock feather headdress and her ruyi head collar on her vestment, or vest over her robe. The robe is underneath, and from beneath there you can see these very voluminous silk sleeves coming out with waves on the ends. This is a style of robe you don't see very often. If you're a robe buyer, you're saying, boy, I haven't seen one of those. No, not many of these made it. These were made in the early part of the 19th century, in the late Qianlong period. And then down here at the bottom, you have this wonderful cobalt ground with gold threads depicting dragons. And then beneath it, you see the rain pattern, the rain pattern in the waves, or the water pattern in the waves, sticking out from underneath the robe. And then below that is her skirt, which is worn inside the robe. And it also has gold thread and is beautifully decorated. So there it is. This is the first of the two. It's absolutely splendid. And after I bought it, I decided I was going to give them to my wife for Christmas one year. And that year, I couldn't wait for another Christmas, so I gave them to her on that Christmas. And she absolutely loves them, and they hang in our dining room. And people always admire them because of the quality of the work. And we'll get to the next one now. Well, and here's the second of the two. This one, she's facing forward, as I mentioned before. She's facing straight on. And she's dressed slightly differently. The underrobe with the red sleeves is still the same one. However, she's wearing a different vest in this picture. This is more of a straight-fronted affair. It doesn't have roux heads at the bottom, which the other one have. If you check, we'll go through the pictures in a minute. And she's still wearing the same headpiece. And she's still got the same ruyi head collar on. But in this robe, it does not have the same type of dragons, but slightly different. And in this one, you don't see... get it back in focus. Here we go. On the bottom of the apron, it doesn't have a ruyi head-shaped bottom to it, so it's a bit different. It's a bit different, and then it's also a bit longer. You'll notice it covers much more of the end of the robe inside, and below that is her skirt. Again, the same skirt, but they look wonderful together, and here they sit very happily, I hope. All right, and that's it on the. On Cosby's robes. Okay. Or paintings of the lady in the robes, I should say. Okay. Bye-bye. And there you are, and that's the story of the two paintings, and we're happy to have them. And it's interesting to look at them, and it's easy to forget, too, that when you're looking at things like these Chinese robes, these textiles, these incredibly sumptuous textiles, you have to keep in mind what they represented in the day. Clothing like this was only affordable by the very, very, very wealthiest of Chinese citizens. We talk about the top 1%, and the top a half of 1%. Well, the people that could afford these robes at the time in China were probably part of the 0.0001%. All right, is relative to their population, there's a microscopic number of people. To put it in context, a little further, an outfit like this that you're looking at in today's money, based on average earnings and what people make and so forth, would have cost in today's dollars probably somewhere relative to the $90,000 to $120,000 range just for this one outfit. Okay, that is a very big number when you consider how much even the best couturier, the best designer clothing costs, from Gucci or Armani. A great Gucci sport coat's $4,000 or $5,000. That wouldn't pay for the vest on this outfit. It was so expensive, and it was a matter of status. If a person went out, a lady went out with this sort of clothing on, it would be automatically known that she was part of a very powerful family. That's all there is to it. Immense power, immense wealth. And they owned many outfits like this, and the husbands owned many outfits like this, and just sumptuous silk robes because of the cost of making silk was just so phenomenally high because of the labor costs, the incredible amount of labor that it took to make it, all the work it took to pull the silk from the worm, to feed the worms, to dye it, to spin it, to loom it, to hire a tailor, to get it needleworked, all this fine work, hours, thousands of hours of work. And this is what you end up with, people that can work with gold and metallic threads, people that can make the headdresses and all this. And this was all done to sort of glorify the upper end of Chinese culture and life. And they lived very well relative to the terms, even relative to anywhere in the world. These people lived literally like kings, and just like they were in Europe, and they were certainly equal to any wealthy family in Europe of their day. These guys were the top of the heap, and which also makes it an interesting look culturally at the costumes of things that were representative of the well-to-do at the time. And at any rate, they're nice to see. We're glad to have them. I'll say it again. And I hope you found this a little bit interesting. Okay. Have a great rest of your week. All right. Bye-bye.